Assalamualaikum and good afternoon to my lovely lecturer and my fellow classmate. My name is Mohamad Norhisham bin Mustafa and my metric number is 263450. I am from group 9 and my group members are Atifah, Wan Nur Izzati, Sahmirulzaman and Irfan Najmi. Today we will be presenting about the Keynesian school development seen Keynes. Several important economists like Alvin Hasan and Paul Samuelson helped move their version of Keynes' approach to economics directly into the mainstream of macroeconomics theory. First two sessions will cover Hasan and Samuelson ideas. Third section look at the idea of post-Keynesian economics, who contend that the contemporary new classical synthesis between Keynesian macroeconomics and new classical microeconomics is not only seriously flawed but also incompatible with Keynes' own ideas. Firstly, I will explain about Alvin H. Hasan between 1887 until 1975. Alvin H. Hasan was born in Wigbock, South Dakota. He was attend high school at Sioux Falls Academy and then enrolled at Yenton College, where he graduated in 1910 and received his PhD from University of Wisconsin in 1918. He also taught at Brown University and the University of Minnesota. At Minnesota, he published Business Cycle Theory in 1927, a book that earned him a reputation as being one of the nation's leading macroeconomic scholars. In 1937, 1 year after Keynes' publication of the general theory, Hasan joined the faculty at Harvard. He earlier had pointed out a mathematical error in Keynes' thesis on money, and his initial reaction to the general theory was less enthusiastic. He and his students made Keynes' work and its policy implications the central focus of their fiscal policy seminar. Several of those attending the seminar became prominent contributors to economics and public policy. Hasan's students include such prominent economists as A.C. Dormer, John Dunlop, Walter Salon, Paul Samuelson, Paul Sweezy, James Tomin, and Henry Wallis. In 1941, Hasan published Fiscal Policy and Business Cycle, which supported Keynes' analysis of macroeconomic problems of the 1930s. Hasan's influence was international. 10 of his books were translated into one or more languages, totally 29 translations. A guide of Keynes became familiar to thousands of graduate students who used it in their struggle to understand the more esoteric section of Keynes, the general theory. Next, I will explain about the Hicks-Hansen synthesis. 1 year after the publication of the general theory, John R. Hicks published an important journal article, which is Mr. Keynes and the Classic, a suggested interpretation. Hicks pointed out that Keynes' theory of the interest rate and therefore his theory of equilibrium income was indeterminate. In figure 21.3, Keynes viewed that the interest rate as being determined by liquidity preference, which is money demand MD and the money supply MS. Meanwhile, once the market rate of interest is determined, then the level of investment become as known at figure 21.2. Together with consumption expenditure, Investment determine aggregate expenditure and thus the level of national income and domestic input. HITS correctly notes that kidney's liquidity preference schedule itself, which is MD, depend on the level of national income. At higher income level, people desire to hold more money to buy the greater volume of goods and services available. The level of income does depend on the interest rate through investment, but the interest rate depend on the level of income through liquidity preference, which is MD. Hicks then suggested a way to resolve this indeterminacy and in so doing develop a unified economic model that synthesizes the Keynesian and neoclassical perspective. Today, we refer to the Hicks-Hansen synthesis as ISLM model.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Atifah Norman. My matric number is 261299. Okay, today I will present my part, which is Sir John Hicks. Sir John Hicks was born in 1904 at Warwick, England. He got education at Clifford College and Balliol College from 1917 until 1926. Okay, Sir John Hicks lectured at London School of Economics and Political Science, Cambridge from 1926 to 1938 and became professor at University of Manchester. Okay, Hicks most familiar with ISL model. Okay, this model formalizes an interpretation of the theory of John Maynard Keynes and describe the economy as a balance between three commodities, which is money, consumption, and investment. The ISLM model. S curve shows potential points of equilibrium in the goods market, while LM curve shows potential points of equilibrium in the money market. Okay, so IS curve represent all the combination of interest rates and level of income at which planned investment equal to planned saving, while LN curve indicates all the combination of interest rates and level income at which money supply is equal to money demand. Okay, the equilibrium of interest rate and level of income is shown. YIS curve and LM curve are intersect. So this is the only combination of interest and income where there is equilibrium in both goods market and money market. Okay, now we take a look with the IS curve. Okay, now this is for graph. Okay, we begin with graph A, then proceed with the clockwise B, C, and D. Okay, for the graph A, shows investment demand curve. Investment demand curve for hypothetical economy. So the inverse relationship between investment here, interest rate and investment. Okay, suppose the interest rate is I1. Okay, I1 here. Then as we see from A1, the curve, the level of investment will be I1 here. Okay, so proceed to B, graph B. Okay, graph B is 45-degree line. Enable us to measure investment spending vertically as well as horizontally. Okay, by directing a line upward from A1 here in the graph A to the point B1 here in the graph B. Okay, we transfer the I1 investment I1 from graph A to the graph B to the graph B here. Next is graph C shows the key as income or Y increase, the level of saving increase rises by a fraction. Okay, this fraction is also a slope of the saving function, or it is Keynes MPS. Okay, potential level of equilibrium income will occur at C1 here on the saving function because at this point I1 of investment each matched by an equal amount of saving here saving S1. Okay, by dropping a vertical line downward from C1 to the D1, we discover, by dropping a vertical income, which is Y1. Okay, next, extending the line further downward to the graph D. We establish the point D1 and the level and the interest rate is at I1 and income is at Y1. This is IS curve. Okay, next we take a look for LM curve. LM curve shows potential points of equilibrium in the money market. Okay, so general technique to derive LM curve, same as to derive IS curve. Okay, we begin with graph A, which is relate interest rate and speculative demand um, uh, when people desire to hold. Okay, at low interest rate, which is I1 here, people will hold large cash balance for speculative purpose and few bonds because the expected rise in the interest rate will cause the price of bonds to fall. Such a rise will create a capital loss for those holding bonds. Okay, at high interest rate, which is I2, on the other hand, people will economize on their holding of cash balance. Okay, we select a specific interest rate such as I1 in graph A and observe that people will desire to hold speculative demand at LS. So the point is at A1. Okay, for the graph B, shows the total money supply. Okay, increase in money supply will be shown as parallel upward shift of the line. Okay, in equilibrium, the quantity of money supply, which is M, must equal to the amount of money demand. Okay, the demand of money consists of money desire of speculative purpose, which is in this case we have determined to be LS, and the amount people desire for buying goods and services. Okay, by extending a line upward from A1, here that that the amount of money needed for transaction purpose is at LT1 here. So here where this transaction balance result to the graph C, national income of the Y as shown as at C1. Okay, straight line here. Okay, next we drop C1 and extend a line horizontally from A1 to get point D1 in graph D. Okay, the point as is true for all points on the LM curve represent potential equilibrium between supply and demand in the money market. Okay, now we look at the equilibrium of ISLM model. Okay, for just now I just mentioned the intercept of rate and level income are determined where IS and LM curve are intersect. So here the intercept point of LM and I, so we can look the interest rate is IO and the income is at YO. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Wan Nur Izzati Binti. My metric number is 261390. I will present about Paul A. Samuelson. Paul A. Samuelson was born in Gary, Indiana on May 15, 1915. After receiving his BA from the University of Chicago, Samuelson enrolled in the Harvard Graduate Program in Economics. At Harvard, Samuelson was caught up in the beginnings of the Keynesian Revolution and Alvin Hansen was one of his professors. Already a brilliant mathematics student, Samuelson decided early to apply mathematics to the body of economic theory. Undaunted, Samuelson took a position at neighboring Massachusetts Institute of Technology (MIT) MIT during that time had excellent reputation in engineering and science, but not in economics, and he changed that. His article covers such diverse topics as consumer behavior, linear programming, capital and growth, the history of economic theory, economic methodology, welfare economics, public expenditure theory, national income determination, and fiscal and monetary policy. Samuelson, also known as the founder of modern economics, was one of the best-known American economists, both to his fellow economists and to the public at large. The multiplier accelerator interaction. In 1939, Samuelson published two papers in which he identified and explored the interaction between the principles of the multiplier and accelerator. This interaction has become one of the foundations of modern business cycle theory. Neither idea taken singularly was new. Kant developed the notion of the multiplier and Keynes used it as a central feature of his theory. John Maurice Clark discussed the acceleration principle as early as 1970. He argued that fluctuations in the output and price of capital goods are much greater than those for the consumption goods they produce. Even if the demand for consumer goods continues to grow, a change in the rate of growth will be transmitted back with intensified force or acceleration to the capital goods sector. A cessation of growth in the demand for final goods thus leads to a sharp decline in the demand for capital goods. Hasan was aware there was an interaction between the two principles and suggested to Samuelson that he use his mathematical skill to explore the ideas. Using difference equations, Samuelson demonstrated that change in income will depend on the size of the FTC and the size of the accelerator coefficient. The former determines the multiplier, and the latter is the change in investment spending induced by a change in the rate of income growth. Samuelson showed that, depending on the values of the multiplier and accelerator and whether an increase in investment is continuous, an initial autonomous increase in investment could produce a wide variety of outcomes, ranging from no lasting increase in income to an ever-increasing level of income. Samuelson showed that it is the interaction between the multiplier and accelerator that gives rise to cyclical fluctuation in economic activity. The process is when there are an increase in autonomous investment, it will lead to an increase in income through multiplier. Then the induced investment through accelerator also increase. Lastly, aggregate demand and income increase by even a large amount. Next, to get a consumption function, we can derive it from income approved function, which is y equal to c plus I plus d plus x minus m. So after we derive it, we can get a consumption function, which is c equal to a plus by minus bto minus bty. Function, which is I equal to I0 plus ZY. Other equation function is G equal to GO, X equal to XO, and M is X equal to MO plus MY. Lastly, we substitute into income's equation. So we get Y equal to 1 over S plus BT plus M minus Z times A minus BT0 plus I0 plus G0 plus X0 minus M0.
My name is Irfan Najmi bin Shawaluddin. My matrix number is 264895, and I would like to present about the post-Keynesian economics. The basic tenets of Keynes post-Keynesian, which is have 5, which is neo-Ricardian view of production, value and distribution. Second, markup pricing. Third, endogenous money. Fourth, pronounced cyclical instability. 5. Need for an incomes policy. For neo-Ricardian view of production, value and distribution, the 1860 Piero Sraffa published Production of Commodities by Means of Commodities, a prelude to a critique of economic theory which is reconstructed Ricardo's production and value theory in a modern form. According to Sraffa, the pattern of demand for various products does not affect the pattern of prices. Rather, it affects only the scale of output in each industry. The real values, price of goods depend on the shares of the commodities necessary to produce them. Relative values and profits are determined by the production techniques used to produce a composite standard commodity which consists of the basic commodities in the economy. The first theory produced a novel conclusion, which is the level of domestic output is entirely independent of how it is distributed between wages and profits. Any distribution of wages and profit is consistent with a particular level of output. Second, John Robinson and other post-Keynesians expanded Sraffa's unconventional theme. Robinson argued that it is desirable and possible for society to control the distribution of income. This can be done through the socialization of investment, public ownership of the means of production, or income policies. Market pricing. Market pricing is prices are set by oligopolistic corporations. These firms finance investment largely from retained profits to achieve their desired level of profits and therefore realize their investment plans. Oligopolies set prices above current costs. When costs rise, firms increase their prices to maintain their markups over their costs. Endogenous money. Contrary to the view held by Fisher and Friedman, post-Keynesian regards the stock of money as being essentially endogenous to the economy, changing in response to changes in the level of wages. Wage increases because production costs rise, creating a greater demand on the part of firms for working capital to finance their more expensive goods in progress and inventories. Hence, business borrowing rises and money stock increases. Is cyclical instability. The economy is inherently unstable. Investment must grow sufficiently to keep national income and output growing at a steady rate. Because of periods of alternating environment of business optimism and pessimism, it often does not. When investment is less than required to maintain the steady rate of growth, the economy recedes and unemployment rises. For an incomes policy. According to post-Keynesian, the class struggle for income shares and the market pricing by oligopolies necessitate a permanent incomes policy. If there is perhaps one point on which economists with a post-Keynesian perspective are likely to agree, it is that inflation cannot be controlled through conventional instruments of fiscal and monetary policy. This is because they regard inflation as resulting and necessarily from any excess demand for goods, but rather from a more fundamental conflict over the distribution of available income and output. It is for this reason that post-Keynesian economists, instead of asking whether and necessary, have generally moved on to the question of how an income policy can effectively and equitably.
My name is Sahmirulzaman bin Samsudin and my metric number is 263528. So, I will be explaining about the new Keynesian economy. The new Keynesians reject the neo-Ricardian value theory of the post-Keynesian. They also reject the post-Keynesian's call for incomes policies, citing the resource misallocation resulting from these policies and the poor historical success of wage and price control in reducing inflation. According to the new Keynesian theorists, decline in aggregate demand produce declines in real output and corresponding increase in unemployment because the price level and the nominal wage are inflexible downward. In past semester examination A162 session question 4B, students were required to compare the theory of downward price and wages inflexibility between post-Keynesian and the new Keynesian. According to post-Keynesian economists, they believe that price and nominal wages are perfectly flexible. Initial equilibrium is at point A, where AD1 intercept with AS1. If AD decrease from AD1 to AD2 and AS remain at AS1, the price level decreases from P1 to P2 and equilibrium point move from point A to point B. This has caused real output to decrease from its full employment level Q3 to less than full employment output Q1. The lower price level and the greater unemployment will enable producers to decrease nominal wages. This will shift AS to the right from AS1 to AS2. New equilibrium will be at point C, where AD2 intercept with AS2 and real output return to Q3. This remarked the end of recession. Examination for A161, A162, A151 and A152 session, students were required to explain in detail about the downward price and wages inflexibility of new Keynesian theory. According to the new Keynesian economist, price and nominal wages are inflexible downward. Instead of moving the economy quickly from A to B to C, a decrease in AD from AD1 to AD2 will move the economy from A to D, and the real output will decrease from Q3 to Q2. Because wages are inflexible downward, unemployment associated with real output Q2 will persist until return to AD1. They claim that active fiscal and monetary policy should be implemented to shift AD2 back to AD1. There are 4 reasons for price and wages rigidity. For instance, menu costs, formal and implicit contracts, efficiency wages, and insider-outsider theory. The first reason for prices and wages rigidity is menu cost. A menu cost is the cost of firms resulting in changing its prices. Some firms must incur costs when they lower prices. Where menu costs such as these are high, firms may be reluctant to lower their prices even when faced with slack demand. Also, firms in oligopolistic industries must be concerned that a unilateral price reduction may set off deeper cuts by rival. Thus, when aggregate demand in the economy declines, prices, at least for a time, may remain fixed while output and employment fall. And implicit contracts. In past semester examination for A141 and A182 session, students were required to explain in detail about the formal and implicit contracts. New Keynesian point out that unions often sign long-term contracts containing built-in nominal wage increases. Even when contracts are being renegotiated, unions typically vigorously resist wage givebacks. Union leaders, elected by the majority of members, often prefer layoff for the few rather wage cuts for the many. Although many non-union workers do not work under formal contracts, these workers may operate under implicit contracts, which is known as informal agreements or invisible handshake. If formal and implicit contract permit the workplace, the decline in wages are not forthcoming as AD declines and recession occurs, which implies the increase in unemployment. Efficiency wages. In past semester examination for A141 session, question 5C, students were asked to explain thoroughly about the efficiency wages. Efficiency wages increase labor productivity and decrease cost pay for the higher wages. Firms paying efficiency wages will be reluctant to cut wage rates in response to decline in AD because it will encourage shrinking and increase the number of job quits, dampening productivity and increasing the firm's per unit labor cost. Insider and outsider theory. Insider are employed workers who possesses some market power. Outsider are the unemployed who are unable or unwilling to underbid existing wage rate to gain employment. The reason for this disparity is the firms incur labor turnover costs when they replace insiders with outsiders. In conclusion, Hicks correctly noted that Keynes' liquidity preference schedule itself depends on the level of national income. He suggested a way to resolve this indeterminacy and develop a unified economic model with Alvin Hansen's that synthesized the Keynesian and neoclassical perspective. Today, we refer to the Higgs-Hansen synthesis as the ISLM model. Paul A. Samuelson identified and explored the interaction between the principles of multiplier and accelerator. He also identified the simple algebra of income distribution, the Phillips curve, and the contribution such as comparative analysis, reveal preference theory, efficient markets theory, factor price equalization theory, and the public expenditure theory.